Welcome, LA Progressive friends and family. We, being Dick and I, are excited to have Hans Johnson here with us today to talk about something that is coming up in our near future, possibly. So, Hans, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the LA Progressive readership?
Hi, Sharon and Dick. I'm Hans Johnson. I'm president of the East Area Progressive Democrats, the largest Democratic club in Los Angeles County and in the state of California with more than 1,000 members. We are going through our renewal for 2023 right now, and I welcome all members, new and longstanding, to join the club for 2023. Lots of action in the year ahead, including right here in Northeast Los Angeles.
Can you tell them how they can join? What is your URL?
The URL is www.eapd.la, and you can click on the link there for Become a Member. It's as simple as that.
So this is a fairly new club, and you were essentially the one that started it. Why did you start that club?
Well, I was a founding catalyst, I guess I would say, in 2014. We are now beginning our 9th year. And we've grown steadily, I think, over that period, in part because people are hungry for a gathering spot of like-minded progressive Democrats who are not pushovers in the party structure, on issue advocacy, on community organizing, and in speaking up through local media to make sure that bystanders and ordinary grassroots Democrats have a sense of how to plug in and to make their voice heard in representation and on the policy agenda affecting our communities and daily lives. So the club formed in early 2014 to make a difference at the local level, and also to value people's time and to respect people's creativity. We have an enormously creative, richly diverse community of grassroots Democrats here on the East Side, and we need to do our part to make sure that the next generation of Democrats is being informed, being invited to the party, as we like to say, and to find opportunities for service and for leadership.
Thank you, Hans, for doing that really important work. I believe that by informing our fellow community members, we help to develop strong progressives, because many people really don't know which way they stand until they begin to understand the issues. So I want to touch on, and the reason for this call is that we had met and you talked about strategies, the pros and cons that are associated with Kevin De Leon, who was the city council member for City Council 14. What would happen if there was a recall and replace? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Sharon, and thank you for tuning in to this issue. I'm a CD14 resident and voter myself, so this has firsthand significance for me and for our club. About 40% of our 1,000+ members are in Council District 14, and this has very daily significance for us, because we believe that we have lost effective representation by a council member who's disqualified himself, words that I think are reflected in the LA Times survey this Sunday, the disqualifying events by which this council member has self-destructed. So one thing I want to point out right at the top is that recall and replacement under the rules for recall elections in Los Angeles are on the same ballot. So a recall question is not separable from the consideration of what the LA City Election Code calls the selection of a successor. They are one and the same election. You do not get to vote on a recall separate from the consideration of replacement. And that issue of replacement raises a number of sticky issues that this mechanism of the recall of local officials presents us with as voters.
So just to restate, for those people who simply want to remove him, they need to understand that the rules are such that it's impossible to simply vacate or have him vacate the seat without at the same time simultaneously electing someone to replace him.
That's correct. And once a recall petition goes forward and is deemed sufficient, having met the number of voter signatures required to launch a recall election, then the city clerk opens filing for those successor candidates or replacement candidates. So there is a process stipulated under the LA Elections Code and the referendum and recall provisions for that sufficient referendum petition to then trigger the filing and qualification period for replacement candidates. Many people can come out of the woodwork for that replacement election. And I think it's important to note that the same $220,000 a year salary with a $66,000 per year pension investment, plus a car, plus expenses, that is so alluring for Kevin DeLeon to continue to collect that paycheck as a city council member, also presents a certain allure to some candidates who might step forward to run, whether serious or not, for that replacement ballot.
But clearly the people of that district doubled Kevin DeLeon for 2 more years. So what's the solution? Do we just drag along with him not representing the people?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that the 2024 election is already in some ways upon us. The March 2024 primary is probably going to have filing open for that election, the regularly scheduled election, which doesn't require a huge labor of signature gathering in order to initiate a special election, in October of this year, with filing likely to close in early December of 2023 for the 2024 election. In some ways, the 2024 regularly scheduled election is already upon us. And as the survey data from the LA Times on Sunday shows, a strong majority of us here in CD14 support a recall and are in no mood to allow for the incumbent council member to rehabilitate himself or to play the kinds of games we've seen using CD14 residents as stage props for turkey deliveries in the run-up to Thanksgiving or in the gift delivery orchestrated events in the run-up to the holidays in late December. People are not in a mood to indulge such antics. And I think voters need to keep a drumbeat going about the need to replace this council member. And we can dig into why there are some serious hazards in the recall that go beyond just the heavy lift for the signatures required to initiate it.
So you are writing an accompanying piece to this interview, which this interview is going to be posted on the LA Progressive and embedded in the piece that you're writing. And I'm assuming that you're going to be going into greater detail. And then has the East Side Progressive Democrats, have they taken a position? Have they voted on this? And are they making recommendations? And the full disclosure, Dick and I are members of the East Side Progressive Dems.
Yes, EAPD considered the possibility of a recall in late October of 2022, and we voted to authorize consideration of a recall in Council District 14, targeting the current council member. In the wake of that vote, further research, further discussion, and further facts about the structure of the municipal recall has been undertaken. And I will say that I think that in light of some of the further facts around a recall in Los Angeles for local officials, members are expressing some wariness and reticence about proceeding with a very costly, very demanding recall process that could result in the anointing of 2 existing incumbent lawmakers equally unfocused on problem solving and meeting the needs for CD14 residents as the incumbent council member. Because under the rules for recall in Los Angeles, unlike at the state level, if no candidate gets a majority on that replacement section, part 2 of the recall ballot, then that contest for replacement goes to a runoff. And even if recalled, the official targeted for the recall stays in office for the performance of that runoff election for replacement. And I will note, in a recall context, in a snap election that is hastily the result of a petition process that could take place within months, say in 2023, you could have any existing lawmaker, any recent candidate who has benefited from promotion and from heavy spending to communicate their name recognition with the voters, step forward as replacement candidates, and no candidate could win a majority. But the 2 top vote getters who would go on to a runoff could easily be existing incumbent officials, again, with no real demonstrated dedication to solving the needs of the community or digging into the public and community interest or the common good for CD14 residents here. And we could simply take on this extraordinary amount of work with the effect of putting in office, in a special election context, an incumbent lawmaker who didn't have to choose whether they were running for their existing job or for this seat as council member under the special election framework of a replacement election. And we could have someone just as unfocused on the public interest as the incumbent council member chosen to replace him. What a sad outcome that would be for all of the work undertaken around a municipal recall process.
So the most recent election here in Los Angeles, at least, had a huge anti-incumbent flavor to it, with the election of Eunices Hernandez and Hugo Martinez, perhaps among others. So I'm guessing you're hoping that let Kevin De Leon play out while another anti-incumbent true progressive emerges to be more powerful than those other incumbents who might try to run for his seat.
And I would also note a new school board member, Dr. Rocio Rivas, who defeated a rival who outspent her by about 5-1, and that is candidate for school board Maria Brenes, who might be a candidate for a replacement election under the recall scenario. And some evidence indicates she may be jockeying in precisely that direction, having relinquished the chair of Inner City Struggle and having appeared at a protest march against Councilmember De Leon here in Eagle Rock as recently as October. So there's a lot of benefits that recent candidates, including Brenes, who benefited from a huge spending blitz by charter school promoters in the candidacy for School Board District 2, that can be leveraged in the context of a replacement election, again, heavily splintered amongst multiple candidates. It's possible that the 2 top vote getters from that election could emerge at, say, 14 and 16% of the vote. And that would be the delimited choices that voters would face in a runoff election for replacement. So I'm not saying that we as constituents in CD14 should simply wait. I think, as the Times article indicates, voters here have a strong appetite to replace the incumbent councilmember De Leon, but we need to remind voters, we need to keep up the drumbeat of communication with voters about the need for an effective council member and how our needs for representation are going unfulfilled before the council, where he has been stripped of committee spots and where he is the subject of protests even by 2 of the council colleagues you mentioned, Dick, in describing some of the progress we've made for progressive representation here at the municipal level in Los Angeles. I think that the concerns about the recall make for a great teachable moment about local democracy, and that itself should be put on the table for voters beyond CD14, but certainly in CD14 also. But I think we have an obligation to communicate as Democrats who support good representation and good governance here in the context of 3 city council members indicted for fraud and for racketeering and for self-dealing in their roles. Former council member Mitch Englander has just left jail for those charges of corruption. We face a trial for former council member, or I would say disgraced former CD14 council member Jose Huizar, although that now has been avoided with a plea deal that may result in a 9 to 13-year sentence for that racketeering operation he directed and has pled guilty to, operating out of his office. And there's the outstanding trial of council member Mark Ridley Thomas, who has a placeholder in CD10 now, and an investigation by the County of Los Angeles over any other episodes of self-dealing that may have ensued on the Board of Supervisors. So the track record at the city level is a gloomy one, but it's one where we, as informed constituents and Angelenos, need to speak up and engage people in trying to insist on and trying to create more faithful representation for us and our communities that's focused on the common good and that's reasonably well trained so as to avoid the many inducements by favor seekers and others to skirt the rules or to break the law.
Thank you, Hans. I think that you've just given us 3 excellent reasons why we shouldn't jump the gun and just sort of vote for anyone but Kevin. And there are so many people that are willing to do this. This is a perfect time for us to learn more about good governance. Dick, were you trying to say something before we say goodbye?
Yes. Did you hit the record button?
Yes.
Oh, okay. It is recording.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Well, thank you, Hans Johnson, for joining us. I encourage everyone to read the content that is attached to this video. And this has been another very educational opportunity to spend some time with our community leaders. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you,
I'm
Hans.
honored by your request. Thank you both.